Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Randy Bock. Today is March 9, 2022, and we are here for a potential victory lap uh, coronavirus conversation. COVID-19, the key number there is 19. Now it's 22. We're in 2022. Um, I've been asked a lot of questions over the last few days by people who are still essentially like the Japanese soldier found in 1974 in the Philippines, the last soldier fighting World War II for the Imperial Japanese Army, which had been gone for the prior 29 years, surrendered to General MacArthur and the American forces and so forth. That soldier, I can't remember his name, but he actually went on to a certain amount of fame in Japan for having been so stalwart. And he refused to believe the airdropped pamphlets by the Americans, and the Americans knew that, so they had the Japanese new government put them down. Of course, he wouldn't believe that either. And then they brought somebody from the Japanese government to try to find him. This was not a mission without some harm. That is to say, the Japanese soldiers continuing carrying on. I think that at first there were a band of 3 or 4 of them. They, I think eventually peeled off. So there was just one remaining. But that merry band of soldiers wreaked havoc on the Philippine community on the small island. They were stealing animals and they killed people who got in their way. They were they kind of became mythologized as ghosts because they didn't come out from their redoubts in the hills and whatnot. The weather was warm, so they managed to live for the duration. Carrying on fighting a war that doesn't exist is, I guess, it got the accolades of certain parts of the Japanese public, but it's not admirable in and of itself when you're working against. I guess the actual situation such as it is, and when you're working under an illusion, which in a sense becomes delusional in this case. We are seeing all kinds of evidence of people fighting the last war. Right now, as we can see, there's a new war that's captivating much of our attention, sadly. The invasion of Ukraine by Russia. And I'm not going to spend too much time dealing with the geopolitics of that. That would be a separate podcast. But if you're interested, maybe we can chat about that at some point. Like everything else, I've got opinions. Everyone who was a COVID expert for the last 2 or 3 years is now becoming a Ukraine/Russia expert and a Putinologist and so forth. I think there are a lot of interesting ways to look back on this. And if you want to start someplace, I actually recommend there's an article by Lee Smith. I think it's Ukraine's Big Gamble. I found that as kind of a good way to position oneself to look at that new problem. And probably I won't be doing a video cast weekly on that, not really having that area as my expertise. So what did we learn by the Japanese soldier? Well, we see this. I see this day by day, and you probably do too. In Massachusetts, probably more than in certain places that were all free to begin with. What does that tell us? In Florida, you don't really see this. You don't see people walking around outdoors with masks because they weren't ingrained that way to begin with. The virus really, speaking of prisoners, takes no prisoners, and since virions are I think 50 microns wide, and they, if my finger were a virion, it would be going through a doorway when it goes through the passages of any of your masks, including the KN95. I understand there's a little bit of filtration and some static electrical aspects that might garner some of the things. And if you keep it really tightly fitted, probably it is a way of cutting down on particulates and virions and so forth. But at what expense? I was at a meeting of investors the other night. It's a group I belong to, and they're wonderful people, really brilliant. But it's sad that in the sense that people who do such firm due diligence on companies, and they they look at all different aspects of a company. I don't think they've really been able to duplicate that level of kind of objective observation with this last pandemic, and so be it. I mean, I think people yield to expertise such as it is and has been presented, and I'm kind of sad that some of the people who have been presented as our experts and our betters have not really lived up to that. I think there's been a fair amount of politicking, and I say this maybe every other week, but the word for politics and public are similar. Same Latin root from the people, and politics and so forth. And the people in the public health establishment are doing a fair amount of politics. They are jockeying for their own power within government, and they're looking for ways to exert their influence. And a lot of them never, really treated patients, didn't have the one-on-one satisfaction that personally I've had as a primary care physician many, many decades now. And there's a certain, you can ask Vladimir Putin. I mean, there is a certain, I assume, satisfaction in getting people to jump at your commands and be the object literally of the world's attention. And this people have been circulating on social media the missing poster of Dr. Fauci. If you see this man, reward missing doc. He doesn't seem to be on the scene anymore. So I think that's. He's way past, retirement age in most industries, including government, long ago. And you think he's 81 or something like that. So he really reached his past due date probably in the last pandemic or so. And not, my thing lately has been Zika. I'm coming out with a book called Overturning Zika in the next week or two on Kindle and whatnot. You can get your copy. But he kind of mangled that. I mean, he promised a Zika vaccine, in his version of what he thought would be Operation Warp Speed. He didn't use those words, but he asked people to hold off having babies throughout the tropics. And the WHO did the same type of thing. They advised women not to become pregnant in a variety of countries and parts of Brazil as well, through the Americas, tropical Americas. And still now it's 2022, and there's no vaccine for Zika out. So Mr. Trump should be commended on having really brought industry and government and expertise and pharmaceutical all together. And a lot of the problems we're having now, insofar as the Pfizer and whatnot have, they got huge lifting of liability for their product in order to get it out. So, that was helpful in getting the vaccine to creation. And, that was I think a good thing overall. We were under the throes of a misapprehension or a lack of understanding, say, of what the virus was. I think it was really difficult because the places it hit first are the most populated places in the United States. It hit absolutely the worst place first, New York City. And in New York City, I'm from New York City myself, the borough of Queens, which now is the single most polyglot place on the planet. I think there are 400 and something different languages, dialects extant in Queens. And so people don't necessarily talk to each other that much. It's kind of like the biblical Babel, Tower of Babel and so forth, many populations, but not necessarily getting along, and plus tight spaces, subways, elevators, and so forth. So that was the place where, information was hard to diffuse through the kind of insular aspects of certain immigrants and so forth who don't necessarily want to put their heads above, the whack-a-mole kind of thing. And a lot of them are illegal and whatnot. So there was, there was kind of an aggrandizement of what the numbers would be, and we didn't have really good testing then. So the case fatality rate seemed to be much higher than it was. Obviously, and of course, it was, made worse by the, reinfection of people who were still positive in terms of their breath and whatnot, passing the virus back into the nursing home. So there was an augmentation of nursing home deaths that led to likely much more of a hysteria than there should have been. Getting back to Zika, there was, also an aggrandizement of a panic, basically, that made the Zika microcephaly problem much worse than it was. And if you're interested in that, again, contact me and I'll go into that further. So what do we have to learn from this? Well, throughout before there was a vaccine, there were potential treatments, and I still don't know fully the data on HCQ or ivermectin, but they've been, lambasted throughout as, the famous horse dewormer narrative. And insofar as COVID seems to have passed, I think there will be more coronavirus. Just for the record, I'm not saying that's the case. I think Omicron is kind of the first phase of the next phase of a coronavirus that has calmed down and self-attenuated into something mild enough that it's just basically a common cold, or maybe slightly worse than a common cold, and eventually become just a common cold. Those things are going to be around, and people can stay masked for those if they want. But I think it's pointless and fruitless, and we've never done that before. And I think that, people miss out on the costs in human interaction. Again, getting back to my investment group, usually at meetings a couple of years ago, there were in person, I think 30, 35 people, maybe 40. And it's a lot more interaction, a lot more fun. People learn much more from the people who are doing the the entrepreneurial investments pitches, when they can see them up close. They can look at the product, some of the products that people are trying. It's kind of like Shark Tank, I guess, a little bit, with a bigger number of judges. But some of the products, you really want to touch and feel. I mean, in this case, one of the products is kind of a orthopedic type thing, and he didn't, the guy who's doing the pitch lived locally, and does live locally, and he didn't show up for the meeting because I think his wife is pregnant, they're worried, etc. Young people should not have had any worries about this, and it's a matter of misinformation to have worried them to this extent. So I think he suffered a little bit because nobody really got on the bandwagon for his device, because they didn't understand how it would do certain functions, which if he had one in front of us would have accomplished that. So Zoom is okay for certain things, and it was okay for this, I guess, but it doesn't give you that real sensibility that we get from seeing everything in 3 dimensions. I suppose you could put on a some kind of augmented reality goggles, but then you're still beholden on the person who's holding the camera. On your own, you can do things on your own. So this may shock you, but I'm I guess a little bit of an outlier. And so within the group, I didn't understand why we're going to be in the same room. It's a huge auditorium kind of room. Not quite a full auditorium, but 20-foot high ceilings. I can't tell you precisely the dimensions, probably 100 by 50 or something like that. And and an auditorium fit for I don't know, 200 people or something like that, 150. And here we were, very few of us, and people are going to be masked. The college into which we have this meeting has somewhat, I guess they're not very clear rules. If you're vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask. And everybody within the group is multiply vaccinated. And, easily they could have taken them off. And they're taking them off during dinner anyway. A good third of the meeting involves questions and answers and dinner. Snacks, hors d'oeuvres and whatnot, and people have the mask on. Nobody can really fit the food in without that. So, it just, which is it? If there were some toxic gas out there, and you're going to sit in a room, and you had some literally face-saving device like scuba gear or whatever, so you wouldn't, get it. But then you can take the mask off for the hour while the toxic gas is there, and then you put it back on. I just really don't catch the sense of that. I think everybody else does that, understood that, but then there's kind of like this social pressure. We don't want to be the ones that are pointed at, and we don't want, to get approbation. But, I've had this in multiple of my community spheres. I belong to two different kind of sports clubs, tennis and whatnot, and a religious group, congregation, and the same things kind of carrying on. A couple of these groups are still, wanting to be more severe than even the state of Massachusetts has been. In the state of Massachusetts has been absurdly severe, going on far too long, and keeping kids masked up even now. We are caretakers for a young girl on occasion, and she's kind of not quite our granddaughter, but pseudo, I guess. And we've watched her grow up through the years, and the last couple of years have been really tough. She doesn't, really kind of, she's new to the area where her new school is, and I don't think people make friends in the same way, to the same extent as they used to. And it's like, when does this stop? I don't really understand. I was looking at a photo from one of the Massachusetts education unions, teachers unions, and they're all the teachers, let's say middle-aged, I think they're all women, middle-aged, and they're all lined up outside for their photograph, and they're all wearing masks. This is not for coronavirus. That's a message thing. So the kind of the show aspect of this is messaging. And so we are social beings. I get that, and we do things in groups. And I guess, I'm looking at myself right here. I'm wearing a tie. I mean, there's no real reason to wear a tie, I guess. It's not holding anything up. I think maybe when they started, they were keeping your shirts together. People didn't have buttons or something like that. I'm wearing a jacket. I'm, not out fox hunting or whatever these jackets got made for to begin with. I get it. So we, have various social aspects. We wear our hair a certain way, so forth. But a mask needn't be one of them. And if they're being pushed on a health basis, not as, a style aspect, I understand if you go to Afghanistan probably now, women are all going to be masked, and they were masked before we went in 2003, or excuse me, 2001, and they're going to be masked again. Before that, people may not realize that up until the 1960s and 1970s, Afghanistan, the women didn't wear masks at all. It was like I don't know, Greece or Turkey or whatever, or Western part of Turkey and so forth, where people didn't, women didn't wear masks. And it became, so people, these things come and go is my point, but they are social aspects and they're religious aspects and they're legal aspects, but they're not there. I don't think anybody really puts out that they're there to stop viruses. They are out there, I think women are, kind of bound up because they, for social, sexual, marital, familial reasons to kind of keep jealousy down and manage things, whatever. But I don't think anybody really portends that these are or pretends that they are matters for infectious disease. Anyway, so do we have anything useful to cover tonight? Let me see if I can uh, pull up something that might be of interest. Need my glasses. Uh, so I guess first I just have a quick slideshow, and I'm going to go over the slideshow. I'll pull it up here. So what do we have here? It's over. This is Walmart clearance sale on masks. $3 each. They were $12. I think the market oftentimes will tell us things that we already know. I've had this slide up 3 weeks in a row. I leave this up because it's pertinent to what the Surgeon General says in one of the next slides. The CDC basically has withheld critical data on boosters, hospitalizations until recently, wastewater analysis, and they have not been releasing this. So when we've wanted to look at data and talk about what things work, whether this treatment works, or how well the booster works, or how well this works, we don't get to see it. I mean, who pays for this? We do, and we deserve. If you go buy, I don't know, a loaf of bread, you get that loaf of bread. You don't get withheld from you. So at the same time that a lot of people who are trying to bring some counter narratives to what the government presents, either through social media, their own fact checkers, or now in a sense from government, the facts have a hard time getting out. They're basically held hostage to more powerful forces. We create lists of politically dangerous people and drive them to society so the bad people won't take over. So government, when that if it's doing it for your team, such as the term safetyism, it's a kind of an epithet, but I'm in discussion with a MD PhD friend of mine, and there's probably no COVID regulation that he hasn't found favorable or useful. And I point out that a lot of what people think is safetyism, or what we call safetyism, all the dictates of keeping information down, having information come through one governmental source, making people do stuff against their will, acting as a group societally, and that is the nature of fascism. The fasci is the from the Roman. The idea is you bring the sticks together. And then you bind them tight, they're more powerful than they are individually. So that's literally called the fascia. So you're familiar with this term for, when you have fasciitis, the tendons are all grouped together. So fascism is when you group everything together and you have more strength, one would think. And so this is in a sense, whether you want to tie it to the Nazis or not, or Mussolini, this is literally fascism when you have kind of a state-directed authoritarian aspect where speech is limited and only a single viewpoint is allowed. This is from 2021 from the New York Times. This is an op-ed piece. Don't go down the rabbit hole. Critical thinking, as we're taught to do it, um, isn't helping in the fight against misinformation. So, this is all wonderful. If somebody agrees with you, then they're good. And if they disagree with you, they're bad. And if they came to a conclusion different from you, then they don't know how critically to think. This is circular, absurd, and idiotic. Um, let's see. The Surgeon General calls on big tech to turn over COVID-19 misinformation. So this is actually called begging the question. A lot of people think they're begging the question when they mean that something brings up a question. But begging the question is when you put in some false part and you expect everyone. It's like if you had when you want to give your dog a pill. Basically, in a sense, you're begging the pill. You're begging the question. You're putting the pill inside something nice, and he's not going to notice it, and you're going to get slip that in. So if you want to have him take I don't know, at one point one of our dogs took doggy Prozac. You wrap it up in a little piece of, I don't know, salami or something like that. There he goes. That's in a sense begging the question. So here, begging the question is to turn over COVID-19 misinformation. So the begging the question portion is, what they're calling misinformation, which is stuff that disagrees with them. It's not necessarily misinformation by any reasonable standard of the term, because frankly the science has not been proven. This is an ongoing data research aspect throughout 2020, 2021, and so forth. And there's no way you can have science. There's thoughts and there's ideas, and there might be correlations, but to call this misinformation. So this is kind of a bullying aspect that the government is doing. And again, this is emblematic of the term of those bundle of sticks together. So I don't want to spend too much time on this, but you can read, maybe pause and read this yourself. But this is technology companies now have the opportunity to become transparent with the American people about the misinformation. So these are platforms, and they either are one thing or the other. They're either publishers or they are passive purveyors of information. So, when you pick up the telephone classically, in its days of AT&T and whatnot, AT&T couldn't limit what you said on the telephone. They are just really a conduit. And the social media have gotten by some of the libel liability and slander and whatnot by saying that they are merely just like that. They're like AT&T, the telephone company. They're just letting information go by. So they shouldn't be kind of branded or made to be the policeman of what the government happens to think is information, or correct or incorrect information. Either way, these things tend to sort out. If I stayed on the internet every night and announced, I don't know, the sky is green, frogs can sing opera outside of cartoons. I think I could do that for a while, and I wouldn't really get a following. The amazing part about social media is that things tend to aggregate and accrue to those that resonate. So there can be certain wars. I mean, right now we see all kinds of culture wars about what is a man, what is a woman, what does it mean to say you're this or that. As a counterpoint to that, at one point I told somebody in jest that I wanted to I wanted to be trans ageist. I wanted to go around and be a 15-year-old and go to high school and so forth, because why not go on the track team. And I mean, I probably would really be terrible, but I would definitely be able to ace all the courses I might not have at the beginning. I don't really want to do that, but but my respondent said, you can't do that. That's impossible. You can't change your age. It's like, oh, okay, well, there you go. But so some things you can change, some things can't. But anyway, those are all matters of reasonable societal debate. And whatever you agree to here, if you agree that some boys who from yesterday who think they today are girls can go in a locker room, well, that may not fly in Iran, may not fly in Belarus or Poland, whatever. And so these places get to adjudicate to a certain extent, but it's on a societal basis. Things do change. A lot of places that didn't believe X or Y, they go ahead and do it, and they might go back to go, A, B, and C once things pan out. A lot of the most culturally liberal places in Europe are now, the kind of the birthing population and the population demographic is turning more Muslim. And I think the most popular single boy's name in, this is a few years ago, I haven't checked this lately, but in, say Denmark and Germany and England is, whatever variant of Muhammad. So if you're going to be, kind of transing the kids in elementary school, that's going to have a religious pushback, and so be it. And you can debate it and maybe not debate it. You wouldn't be able to debate this in Iran from the contrary point. So, if you want to be in Iran or a place like that, then clearly, stop any kind of discourse and information. If you want to have a place where your set point is created by your social mores, then you need to have them out and about. So um, so 6 months ago, Dr. Murthy used his first formal advisory um, broadside against tech and social media companies. But basically, this is you. You are, the tech and social media companies. Frankly, they're already doing the bidding of, kind of the left of center authoritarian aspects of what I call safetyists, or part of safetyism. So there's really not much else they need to go about doing here. So let's kind of move on. And if they do, they're basically using the tech companies as a branch of government, and some of them are very, far too willing, in my view, to go along with this. And that's why, things get fact checked out of existence. That's why there's kind of like a huge uproar when Joe Rogan has Dr. Malone on and whatnot, and people want to close platforms down. There is one side that seems to be much louder than the other in ways they approach things. This is a slide. Maybe I'll show you the page in a little bit. There's a Dr. Tess Lowry, and I think she's on with she's kind of in she put out a video to point out some factual aspects of misinformation. This is from the UK, and there's a Dr. Andrew Hill. I think he's out of Liverpool and part of, kind of the epidemiologic community. And um, he was kind of on board with her about trying something. There's, when President Trump was there, he had a bill passed. I forget the name of it, but basically, if there's no other treatment around, you can go ahead and do this treatment. You can do experimental treatment. I think it's the right to try or something like that. And in the first year, 2020, of COVID-19, there was no treatment around. There was no vaccine, and there's, people were dying and they were very, very ill. There's no sense not trying certain things. We wouldn't have Viagra if people hadn't been willing to try something that was a cardiac pill, basically like a nitro to open up the arteries. And if people had their minds open about what Viagra could be, ditto Rogaine and Propecia for hair. One was a blood pressure, the other was a prostate pill. Aspirin for heart attacks. Those are secondary uses. It turns out ivermectin is, reasonably safe, kind of anti-parasitical antibiotic, and hydroxychloroquine has some anti-malarial aspects and anti-inflammatory and whatnot. I'm not endorsing them, but there were studies. Ivermectin had been around for a long time, and both these are FDA approved for other reasons. And to call them horse dewormer, that kind of stuff, that was all craziness. That's total misinformation. So, a little bit like O.J. Simpson, when he wanted to find the killer, he wanted to empower people to find, Nicole Simpson's killer, and obviously was looking in the mirror. So I think Dr. Vivek Murthy should, consider the same thing. That's my dog exiting. I guess he's heard enough. He may not want to hear any criticism of Dr. Murthy. So I'll send you a link to this. And so she actually, she recorded her Zoom call, and I think there might be Zoom calls plural with Dr. Hill. And to see him now kind of like try to backtrack, he was on board with this, and then something happened. There was some ghost, in his paper, a shadow reviewer, shadow writer, and it seems to me governmental, that made him come back from the possibilities. Like, well, yeah, why not try it? Why you should have the right to try? There's nothing else going on. People are being locked down, whatnot, and a lot of them are, very ill, elderly, and so forth. Let's try something. Why don't we do this? And so the aftermath of this is going to be, if there's actual free flow of information, it should be, that people should get what Andrew Cuomo should have gotten. He got, kind of taken out of office, but really for a secondary issue with, the womanizing and whatnot. But, I think really there was to get him out of view, is kind of withdraw without bringing this topic up of all the mismanagement and the misinformation. The mismanagement did not come from individuals striving for answers and using open debate. It came from government. So there's a little bit more, it's a sadness because, he shouldn't look that happy. Just like that, COVID is gone. Because people, I guess they have kind of a singular focus to look at some things, not others. And this is a similar slide here. The media, want to move on from coronavirus. And here's similar, meme that people have been saying, if it saves one life, to war, so it's kind of like if they had, any principles. I forget how this one goes, but their only principle is to have no principles, I guess. It's a matter of expedience and whatever works at any particular moment. Oops, I want to go back on this one. Whoops, I'm going back the wrong way. Sorry. So here it is. I hate anti-vaxxers. Russians, you hate Russians now. So everyone's kind of being reprogrammed a little bit for the next fight. But before we leave this last one, these two slides have similar poses. It's kind of a interesting parallel. I'm glad we got our boosters. What is it? It's climate change. Sad. This young girl, I don't know her, Stanford soccer goalie, I think, Katie Meyer, dead at 22. There's just, I showed some data from FIFA, which is the World Soccer Organization, not, for not just the major leagues, but all the minor leagues and anybody who's paid, I guess. And there were something like 5 times more sudden deaths in the last 12 months than there had been in any of the average of the previous, I don't know, 10 or whatever. And this is only coincident with the vaccine's existence. So that's not data either. Just like we can't say anything conclusively about ivermectin, we can't say conclusively about the vaccine, but we can say that you can't talk about it. And so the misinformation aspect is really about what you can and can't talk about. So I think that does it for that slide. So let me just kind of switch back here. Oh, actually, I got a couple more here on my slideshow. Here we go. So maybe this is not quite relevant. You can pause these. You've probably seen these already. So this is not misinformation, and this is not information. So a lot of times what the government gives is just kind of pablum, which I don't know if that's still around or a term, but it's kind of baby food, chewed up in tiny little pieces. And, in this case, it was kind of like oatmeal, mush. And here we have, potentially our 47th president. Russia's a bigger country. Russia's a powerful country. Decided to invade a smaller country. So basically, that's wrong. Now, it doesn't beg, but it brings up the question, what happens when a smaller country invades a larger country? Is that okay? VP? I don't know. And the quote on the left, I don't really necessarily want to parse. So this one is about Ukraine, and again, now that's the focus, and with good reason. World War III is going to be bigger than COVID, if that, sadly happens. But in 2018, if people would just, do the minimum research before spouting off, and then 2022 kick Russia out of NATO. Never been in NATO, it's counter NATO and so forth. So we've seen a lot of the experts on Ukraine, and they were, they're just getting, kind of peeling off from being experts on everything else like COVID. So the new era, I brought this up, but this is from the Wall Street Journal, which I think is an excellent newspaper for the most part, about how to help kids navigate the new era of no mask school. And give them the choice, whether to keep masks on. Yeah, I mean, I don't think so. I think you have to kind of, with kids, you don't give them choices about everything. You don't give them kids, choices on, what they want to wear if they're going to a school with a dress code, and you got to give them direction. They're there, not to kind of play around, not to trade theories. They're there to be given facts and useful facts of how to operate and navigate in society. Is that the last slide here? Nope. Oh, this is from CVS. So I did my own little study. I was out and about, and we don't have to wear masks in stores, but it's Massachusetts. I'd say at CVS, 95% of people were wearing masks, pretty much everybody but me, whether they're working there or they're customers and so forth. I don't know. It's some kind of sanctified quasi-medical place, although people are just buying. They can buy Skittles there as well. Be one step closer tomorrow. This is the current pamphlet there, and she's got her mask on. Great. She's getting a vaccine. The vaccine, again, is for COVID-19. That's many, 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 many strains ago. I think it has minimal use at this point. And again, Omicron is not that bad, and the future ones neither. This is just kind of a quirky side aspect. I encountered this yesterday at our investor group. People put masks on to ask questions, and there's also a Zoom meeting, microphones. It was very difficult for people to understand the other people speaking, and they were not understandable when they're wearing occlusive masks. In this case, there was a deaf woman at a store, I think Dunkin' Donuts, and she didn't have her cell phone or whatever could do translate for her, and the guys behind the counter would only kept their masks on. She was like, "I can't understand you. I can't lip read while you're wearing those," and they wouldn't take them off. And they're young people, not likely to get ill, but rules are rules are rules are rules, and this is kind of a silliness. And so, what we've come to is, I think it's Stockholm syndrome. And it's ironic because he would have been essentially in stocks with that. It's an older term, stockade and whatnot, when you are latched onto something. But here he is, and I don't think that's Putin, but maybe a little bit of a lookalike. But clinging on to masks and lockdowns as a way of comfort. I read ages ago there was a study. Again, I don't have the accuracy of this necessarily. That people who are depressed actually were happier on cloudy and rainy days. I've actually experienced that sometimes myself, without fully being depressed. And supposedly the rationale is like, well, when it's raining, nobody's doing anything. So the fact that I'm not doing anything on any other day, it makes it a little bit easier for me to kind of get along with the concept of not doing anything today, because nobody's doing anything today. So it kind of alleviates my level of insecurity at not being socially active, because today it's such a bad storm that nobody can be. I think there's some aspect of this with the masks and lockdowns. I don't know. I think people just really need to reorder some of their priorities. And again, I think some of this is what's going on outside. And I think that is officially, this is officially my last slide. And just like that, Democrats brought back the pandemic, the depression, the race riots, gas lines. He forgot World War. I think there's some consideration that the World War II actually was made more likely by, the Depression, which was, I think, made stretched out by the New Deal and so forth. But that's another day, another topic. Let's see. I did have a question here. Is my video frozen? If that's the case, that's really sad. I don't know what to say about that. I hope it's not. I hope it didn't remain frozen, and I hope things unfroze. At any rate, I'm going to call it a night. I'm not going to go through a lot of facts and figures. Maybe there's some things to look at. Maybe let's see if there's anything else to look at. I'll just go over some of the headlines that I had here. I just got to pull up the screen. So this is the U.S. Senate. I don't think it's going to pass the House and whatnot, but the Republicans in the Senate want to make a measure to end the state of emergency. I think that's very reasonable. This war is long over. Is an interesting. This is how Russia and COVID kind of overlap. We saw some of this with COVID, that certain people who are unvaxxed shouldn't be treated. We never did this for people who are obese or long-term smokers. We never said, "Oh, you're a bad person. You shouldn't have done that. We're not going to treat you." But here it's we should refuse to treat Russian patients. I think this is unethical. This is the article I think I mentioned to you about the masks. U.S. virologist close to Wuhan lab quietly calls for investigation. So, I'll put these links up. This is again kind of the post-mortem, no pun intended, about COVID. U.S. Homeland Security Department includes issues terrorism advisory to include vaccine dissent. This is shocking. I don't know if people are going to be shocked. They're going to have other things to be shocked about in the meanwhile. This is the video I mentioned about Tess Lori. Dr. Andrew Hill, the man who, I'm not saying, she says, who killed millions. I think that ivermectin would have been better if it does work. Everyone will look stupid for having withheld it and ask for more and more studies when there was no other treatment around. This article here, how the CDC abandoned science. I have not had a chance to finish this, but I've heard it's good, and I recommend it because from people who told me it was good. This one here is, I think, unproven. COVID may cause brain to degenerate 3 times faster than normal. I think that's really impossible to say so early out, and the amounts they're talking about are minuscule. But I do think that, I've often joked that, talking about COVID or seeing people walking around masks has given me a version of Tourette's, because I wind up muttering curse words under my breath at the absurdity of it all. Anyway, so I think that might be an end for me tonight. I hope you enjoyed this, and if you didn't, let me know. If you did, let me know, and I hope we didn't stay frozen the whole time. So